you ever noticed how often religion praises the appearance of goodness, belief, language, ritual, while quietly sidestepping whether anyone is actually being fed, protected, or treated with dignity? Sometimes it sounds spiritual or lofty, but underneath it all is a much simpler question. Do our values show up in real life, or just in our words? Welcome to Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be taking a look at 3 readings from the Christian Bible through the lens of sacred myth. As we reflect on the readings for the 5th Sunday in Ordinary Time, we'll explore the tension between performative morality and real, tangible care. The difference between saying the right things and doing the hard human work that actually makes communities healthier. In this episode, we're asking a tough but necessary question. What if the real measure of faith, character, or integrity isn't what we claim to believe, but whether our lives actually make the world more livable for other people? Because right now, there's no shortage of loud arguments or polished rhetoric, just a shortage of action that feeds the hungry, breaks unjust systems, and pushes back against apathy. So grab a comfy seat, a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's look at some ancient stories together in this edition of Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be exploring the readings for the 5th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle A of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. In this series, we're exploring readings from the Bible through the lens of sacred myth, looking for interpretations and lessons that don't require belief in the supernatural. These texts were written by pre-scientific people, shaped by their own cultures, needs, and agendas, not as history books or scientific manuals, but as meaning-making stories for their communities. And just like believers approach these writings through the lens of faith, I approach them through a more humanistic lens, one grounded in the idea that certain foundational values helped humans evolve and flourish. Now, you might agree with the lessons I find, or you might find something completely different. That's the beauty of treating these writings as sacred myth. We're free to negotiate with the text and discover whatever insights we need right now. So with that, let's dive in. As I said, tonight we'll be looking at the readings for the 5th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle A. Our first reading is from the prophet Isaiah. It's chapter 58, verses 7 through 10. Our second reading is from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. It's chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. It's chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. Now we'll start by going through all 3 of the readings, then we'll look for the messages and the main lesson in each one. Finally, we'll bring everything together, look at what it means for us today, and talk about where we go from here. And with that, let's begin. Our first reading is from Isaiah. Thus says the Lord, share your food with the hungry, and provide the poor wanderer with shelter. When you see the naked, clothe them, and do not turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, Here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. Our second reading is from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness, with great fear and trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its taste, with what can it be seasoned? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." All right, so let's go back and take a critical look at these readings and see what learnings and lessons we can find if we dig around just a little bit. So our first reading was from the prophet Isaiah, and this passage cuts straight through religious performance and asks a rather blunt question. What actually makes a community good? The answer isn't found in fasting or ceremonies or visible displays of devotion. It's found in whether people are fed, housed, and treated with dignity. Let me say that again. This reading from the Christian Bible says that the way to create a good community is by feeding everyone, housing them, and treating them all with dignity. Period. From a humanist perspective, this is an insistence on results over symbolism. If a practice doesn't reduce suffering or expand well-being, it doesn't deserve any sort of moral credit, no matter how sacred it looks. There's also a powerful reminder here that we're not separate from one another. The line about not turning away from your own flesh and blood, it's interpreted differently in different versions of the Bible, but it's not about family. It's a rejection of moral distancing, the idea that other people's pain is somehow not our problem. Human flourishing depends on recognizing our shared condition. Hunger, vulnerability, and dependence aren't failures of character. They're just facts of being human. When societies accept that level of interdependence, empathy stops being optional and becomes a civic responsibility. Now, the passage doesn't stop at charity. It demands change. Breaking the yoke means addressing the systems that keep people hungry and trapped, not just offering some temporary relief. This is where so many modern Christians and institutions more broadly go wrong. They spiritualize real needs. They treat justice as a personal hobby or replace hard action with public virtue signaling. Meanwhile, the text explicitly condemns scapegoating and malicious talk, behaviors that today are often aimed at immigrants, the poor, or anyone deemed inconvenient. Anyway, the main lesson I got from our first reading is that our morality is proven by how we meet human need and confront injustice, not by the rituals we perform. Read without all of its supernatural framing, this text becomes a clear ethical manifesto. Care that doesn't change material conditions is hollow, and piety that ignores injustice is empty. Communities don't become light through belief or ritual alone. They do it by feeding the hungry, sheltering the vulnerable, and dismantling systems that are causing or perpetuating harm. Our morality is proven by how we meet human need and confront injustice, not by the rituals we perform. Our second reading was from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, and this passage pushes back hard against the idea that credibility comes from sounding impressive. Paul deliberately rejects lofty language and rhetorical performance. And while his framing is religious, the underlying lesson is very human. People don't build trust because someone speaks well. They build trust because someone is real, is genuine. From a humanist perspective, this is a critique of manipulation, a critique of using clever words or status to overpower others instead of engaging with them honestly. There's also an unexpected affirmation of vulnerability here. Admitting fear, weakness, or uncertainty isn't a failure. It's an invitation to connection. When people lead with vulnerability, they create space for other folks to show up as they are, to share their true selves, rather than trying to be something they're not, or something they think they're expected to be. That kind of openness breaks down hierarchies and elitism. It makes shared truth accessible to everyone, not just the confident, educated, or socially powerful people. Most importantly, this passage shifts the measure of power away from words and toward outcomes. Instead of persuasive arguments, Paul points to lived demonstration. This is a call to judge ideas by their effects on human lives. Do they reduce harm? Do they build trust? Do they make communities healthier and more resilient? If not, it doesn't matter how eloquent you are, because the ideas suck. This directly challenges modern cultures, religious and political alike, that value performance over substance. So the main lesson I got from our second reading is that truth earns trust through honesty, vulnerability, and lived impact, not through polished persuasion. Stripped of its supernatural claims, this reading becomes a guide for ethical communication. And lead with honesty, speak accessibly, and let your values be tested by their real-world impact. Trust grows where vulnerability meets action, not where clever words mask empty intent. Truth earns trust through honesty, vulnerability, and lived impact, not through polished persuasion. Okay, our final reading was from the Gospel of Matthew. And the metaphors of salt and light work because they're practical. Salt isn't decorative. It exists to preserve and enhance. Light isn't optional. It exists to make our lives navigable. Read through a humanist lens, this passage defines morality in terms of usefulness and impact. A meaningful life isn't measured by personal purity or private belief. A meaningful life is measured by whether our presence makes communities healthier, more just, and less prone to decay. Now, there's also a sharp warning here about integrity. Salt that loses its saltiness isn't neutral, it's useless. In human terms, that's what happens when people abandon their ethical commitments to fit in, to stay comfortable, or to avoid conflict. When we mirror a culture of apathy, cruelty, or dishonesty, we lose the very qualities that allow us to help anyone. Integrity isn't about moral superiority. It's about remaining true to our core values when we're being pressured to make immoral compromises. Now, the image of light adds another layer of responsibility. Visibility. Ethical living isn't meant to be hidden away or confined to private spaces. A city on a hill or a lamp on a stand is exposed, and that exposure is the point. Humanism insists that modeling compassion, reason, and courage publicly matters, especially when we know that injustice thrives in the shadows. And just as importantly, the text reminds us that small contributions, well, they matter too. One light changes a room. A pinch of salt changes a meal. But the main lesson I got from our gospel reading is that our purpose is to actively strengthen our communities by preserving what is good and illuminating what is possible. Taken together, these metaphors call us out of self-centered living and into active participation. They ask whether we're preserving what is worth saving, resisting what corrodes human dignity, and offering guidance when things feel dark. Communities don't stay healthy on their own. They rely on people who are willing to show up, stay true, and make a frickin' difference. Our purpose is to actively strengthen our communities by preserving what is good and illuminating what is possible. All right, let's review the lessons we've talked about so far. In our first reading from Isaiah, the main lesson I came away with was our morality is proven by how we meet human need and confront injustice, not by the rituals we perform. In our second reading from 1 Corinthians, the main lesson I got was truth earns trust through honesty, vulnerability, and lived impact, not through polished persuasion. And finally, the main lesson I got from our gospel reading was our purpose is to actively strengthen our communities by preserving what is good and illuminating what is possible. Our readings this week strip away the comfort of appearances and ask a much harder question. Does any of this actually make life better for people? Across all three, the message is the same. Integrity isn't proven by ritual, eloquence, or identity. Integrity is proven by impact. Feeding the hungry matters more than personal fasting. Showing up with honesty matters more than sounding impressive. Being useful to the common good matters more than claiming moral superiority. When belief, language, or tradition stop producing real care and real change, they hollow out. What holds these texts together is a demand for alignment between what we say we value and how we actually live our lives. Without the tangible work of justice, compassion, and responsibility, even our best words are just empty echoes in a cold, hungry world. So let's step back and take another look at these readings overall and see if we can figure out what these lessons really mean to us in our daily lives. To do this, I'll try to answer two questions. So what and now what? Okay, so what? Why should we care about any of this? Well, we should care about this because apathy is exactly how things fall apart. When politics feels chaotic and institutions feel broken, it's tempting to disengage, to scroll past, tune out, or wait for someone else to fix it. But the insistence on being salt and light is a reminder that personal agency doesn't disappear just because systems are failing. If people of good conscience withdraw, the vacuum gets filled with those who are loud, cruel, and unaccountable. This is important because polarization thrives on forgetting our shared humanity. The constant us versus them framing of everything, whether it's politics, religious, racial, or cultural, it works by convincing us that other people are fundamentally different from us. These readings push back hard against that lie. They re-anchor moral responsibility in kinship, reminding us that social cohesion isn't some sort of luxury. It's a prerequisite for peace and stability in a deeply, deeply interconnected world. We should care because performative outrage doesn't feed anyone or free anyone. Our public life is dominated by arguments, memes, and symbolic battles, while real human needs go unmet. The ethical demand of Isaiah 58 pulls our attention away from culture wars and back to basics: food, shelter, safety, and freedom from oppression for everyone. A society that can't meet those most basic needs, no matter how loudly it debates values, is already in moral trouble. These lessons are important because democracy itself depends on integrity and empathy. Without honesty, accountability, and visible care for others, democratic norms decay and authoritarianism fills the gap. Too many people on the religious right have traded vulnerability for dominance. They've traded service for power. And they've traded shared ethics for identity politics. In other words, they're completely missing the very heart of the scriptures they claim to defend. The humanist takeaway here is clear. Our shared humanity is the only durable foundation for a shared future. If people of good conscience don't live that truth in tangible, inclusive ways, no system, religious or political, is going to save us. And the last question I'll try to answer is, now what? What are we supposed to do? Well, when everything feels overwhelming, it's easy to assume that only big gestures or sweeping movements matter at all. But as I've said so many times before, most change doesn't start that way. It starts with small, steady acts that preserve what's good, that push back against the decay, and that quietly make life more livable for someone else. Being salt of the earth isn't about standing out. It's about showing up where you already are and doing something that actually helps. So with that in mind, here's your question for the week. Where in my everyday life could I act as a pinch of salt this week? Basically, what small concrete action could you take that would make things just a little better for someone else? Taking time to answer this matters because it shifts you from frustration to agency. You feel like you have at least a little bit of control in this chaotic world. Answering the question helps you identify actions that are within reach instead of waiting for perfect conditions or for someone else's permission. Naming a specific, doable step builds confidence. It reinforces integrity and makes your values tangible rather than theoretical. Being a pinch of salt doesn't require a podium, a protest. You certainly don't need a perfect plan. It starts right where you are. From home, it can look like checking in on someone you haven't talked to in a while, sending a message that says, "I was thinking about you. How are you really doing?" It might mean reading past a headline before reacting, donating a small amount to a local mutual aid group, or choosing not to amplify outrage when what's actually needed is a bit of clarity and a little care. At the store or out in public, it can be as simple as treating workers like human beings, making eye contact, saying thank you, showing patience when places are understaffed or people are stressed. It might mean stepping in gently when someone is being spoken to disrespectfully, or offering help to someone who looks overwhelmed. Small acts of dignity have a way of cutting through the background noise of indifference. At work, being a pinch of salt can mean refusing to join in on the gossip, or speaking up when someone is being ignored or talked over, or mentoring someone quietly without expecting credit. It can look like choosing honesty over convenience, equity over favoritism, or collaboration over competition, especially in spaces where cynicism has become the norm. And with family, friends, and neighbors, it often means doing the harder, slower work of staying connected, listening without always needing to jump in and fix it, setting boundaries without cruelty, disagreeing without dehumanizing people. Remember that salt is also a preservative. And sometimes the most powerful act of preservation is showing people that decency still exists. showing them that empathy hasn't gone out of style and that integrity isn't just naive. None of these actions are going to make the evening news. But together, they preserve what matters. They slow the rot of apathy. And they can quietly make the world more livable, one small, deliberate act at a time. Over time, this practice changes how you see yourself. From a bystander reacting to events to someone who understands that even small acts of care, honesty, or courage can preserve the health of a community and keep the darkness from spreading. Well, before I wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with one more thought. Pirkei Avot, a Jewish ethical text, reminds us that it is not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. This line cuts through one of the biggest obstacles to ethical action, the belief that if we can't fix everything, why bother doing anything? Pirkei Avot reminds us that moral responsibility isn't about saving the whole world. It's about refusing to opt out of it. You don't have to solve injustice. You don't have to heal every wound. You don't have to fix every broken system, but you do have to participate in resisting harm and preserving what's good. That's exactly what it means to be salt of the earth. Salt doesn't transform a meal by itself, and light doesn't banish all darkness at once, but both are necessary. This quote gives people permission to stop waiting for grand solutions and start acting where they are, at home, at work, in their relationships, knowing that small, genuine efforts still matter. It is not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. When people internalize this idea, it changes how they live. They stop being paralyzed by how large the problems seem to be and simply start looking for concrete ways to contribute. They understand that decency isn't measured by how much you accomplish, but by whether you refuse to walk away. Being a pinch of salt means accepting that the work is bigger than you, but choosing to stay engaged anyway. All right, we've come to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next week. But in the meantime, I encourage you to engage with our question for the week and pay attention to the important lessons you come across wherever you find them. You'll create a more purposeful and joyful life, and you'll start to feel more connected to the world and the people around you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mythologizing the Bible as we did a deeper dive into the readings for the 5th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle A of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. Remember that being salt of the earth isn't about standing out. It's about showing up where you already are and doing something that actually helps. The Bible readings used for this episode are from the Holy Bible, New International Version, NIV. Copyright 1973, 1978, 1984, 2011 by Biblica Inc. Used by permission, all rights reserved worldwide. Thank you for listening. If you like this content, please consider telling a friend about it. The more people who hear the positive messages I'm sharing, the better. Mythologizing the Bible is a live-streamed series held most Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/TheCodaProject. Every week, the audio of these Mythologizing the Bible presentations is released as a podcast. You can find the podcast at thecodaproject.com or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Pocket Casts. To learn more, to subscribe to my mailing list, and to keep up on everything I'm doing with the Coda Project, please visit thecodaproject.com.